Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on East Granby. Today's date is Tuesday, September 7th, 2010. Our guest tonight is Susan King Adamus, a resident of East Granby and a spouse of our previous guest, 2 guests ago, Raphael, who is also on this show. Good evening.
Hello. How are you? Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you, Sue.
Thank you.
Okay, Sue, you were born on October 16th, 1941 in Wethersfield, Connecticut.
Yes.
You lived there until you were 2, did you say?
Yes. When
Okay.
I was 2, my parents moved to Manchester,
Okay.
where they lived for, I believe, 57 years.
Okay. So you resided there through your high school years and your
Yes,
until you left home?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why don't you see what is your earliest memory? Obviously, I don't think you remember Wethersfield. That's a little young for a memory. But what would be your earliest memory that pops into your head?
Oh, living in the family-oriented neighborhood.
Okay.
And at the time, we had a lot of woods near us, and there were hills with a lot of sand where we could just go and play, but now it's all houses, it's all
A huge
developed.
playground.
There's no woods. Used to be woods up the street from us, but there's an elementary school that I went to when it first opened, and I was in 3rd grade at the time.
What were your parents' names?
My mother was Virginia King, and my father was Harvey King.
Okay.
And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she did Girl Scout. She was a Girl Scout leader, and she was involved with us a lot. I have 3 sisters. My dad was a president of a toy company.
Okay.
It was a K. Clark cloth toy company, but we used to like to kid and say it was a K. Clark cute cuddly cloth toy company.
Oh, really? What kind of toys? Was it in Manchester?
It was in Manchester. It was on Hilliard Street, and my aunt was a designer and the founder.
Right.
And early on, she was working at an insurance company, and she would make stuffed toys at home and just bring them in and set them on her desk.
Okay.
And people kept wanting to buy them, so she finally started a company.
Wow.
And then my dad was a salesman for quite a few years, and then he took over as the president of the company.
So it was basically dolls, is that primarily?
Dolls, dogs, cats, all kinds of animals. Stuffed animals, soft
Wow.
stuffed animals.
And what happened to that business? Was that?
When I was in college, my dad tried to expand it and go big, but it didn't work out, and they went bankrupt.
Okay.
He had opened a plant down south, and it just didn't work out.
So that was probably in the 50s?
Probably in the 60s.
60s, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of transition in manufacturing in that era, shifting of plants. It's no surprise. It was a tough time. Okay, so you grew up in Manchester during just after the post-war
Right,
era.
the 40s and 50s.
What are your memories of Manchester, not so much as a small child, but growing up there?
Well, I remember walking to the schools, and we'd walk to school. I had to come home for lunch. When we went to the new school, well, at the time, Bauer School, it was just a block up the street from me.
It's elementary school.
An elementary school. So then I'd walk home for lunch and go back to school.
Yeah, they built schools pretty much in every major neighborhood where they could back then. Yeah.
And when I was a freshman in high school, I went to the old high school. My sister was a senior, and I was a freshman.
Okay.
And we had double sessions. And she went from 8 to 12 in the morning, and I went from 12 to 4 in the morning. And
12 to 4 in the afternoon.
12 to 4 in the afternoon. And then my sophomore year, the new high school, which is Manchester High School, opened up, and then I went there.
That was a classic baby boom dilemma. They had so many kids so quick they couldn't build the schools fast enough.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And so you went to which school in Manchester? You said you just mentioned that.
I went to Hollister Street School from kindergarten to 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. And then Bauer School opened up there. I went from 3rd to 6th. Then I went to Hollister for my junior high. and then to Manchester High School.
Okay. Now, when you were that was a fairly booming town in that era, huh? I mean, there was a lot of building, a lot of growth, a lot of new houses.
Yes, and a very nice main street.
Right.
And
which is still there in a variation.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes, it's still there. And it's a very wide main street.
Very.
Yeah, it is. It's a wide main street.
Classic old.
And that's where we did our shopping.
Yeah, it always struck me, Manchester was one of the few towns that didn't gut their downtown in urban renewal, and most of the other towns around here got
right. Well,
torn
then
down.
the Parkade opened,
Right.
and there were stores there.
Okay.
So that was good because it helped to relieve parking downtown, but it did hurt the downtown business.
Right.
And then where the Buckland Hills Mall is now, we used to call that Five Corners, and we used to go out there to buy corn at the corn crib.
It was all farmland.
It was all farmland.
Yeah. Well, that's that's fairly. That was what, the late '70s, early '80s. They started developing that area.
I think so.
Yeah. I know. I was probably in high school. But so you grew up in Manchester. Any other memories of going to school there that you want to share with us, or?
As it turned out, my oldest sister Nancy never got to go to any of the new schools.
Oh, she was a little bit ahead of you?
She was 3 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
And then I got to go to Bauer School when it was a new school, and I got to go to the high school when it was a new school too. But my sister missed that.
So she was stuck in the overcrowded older scan. Well, I get it was such a boom that they really couldn't.
Yeah.
They couldn't keep up with.
Yeah.
So you when your father was running the toy company, was that? I guess every kid would wonder, did you have a lot of toys?
Oh, yes.
You were kind of a trial proving ground at the...
Yeah, we had a lot of toys, and I remember that my sister, who's 2 years younger than I, Ginny, and we shared a room.
Right.
And we had a big horse named Gravy. I have no idea why we called it Gravy,
okay.
but he just was part of our life in our room.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be every kid's dream parent. You know, my father owns a toy company, right? So your mother was a stay-at-home mom, and you went through your school years. Now, what did you do after you graduated Manchester High? What did you pursue?
Well, when I was growing up, I never knew there was any choice after high school but to go to college.
Okay.
That's just what we did. Now, my dad never even graduated from high school.
Okay.
And my mom did graduate from high school, but that was it. But they were sure that we were going to all get our college education. So I went to New England College in Henniker, New Hampshire for a year. At first I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but then I did an awful lot of babysitting.
Right.
And especially the assistant principal at the high school, I'd babysit for his 3 children, and after a while he said, you really should consider teaching because you're so good at it.
Right.
And so I did go into teaching, and I ended up graduating from Plymouth State College in Plymouth, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I've taught in New Hampshire, in Ohio, and in Connecticut.
Walk us through your years right after you graduated college. Where did you go from there?
After I graduated, we got married.
You met Raphael at college.
At college, yeah, right. Yes. And we got married and lived in Manchester, New Hampshire for a year or two. And we both were working in the Manchester area. So then we moved to Merrimack.
Right.
And I taught there in Manchester until I had children at Green Acres School, and then after I had Kathy, I got a teaching job in Merrimack.
Okay.
And I taught second grade for quite a few years.
So you were an elementary school teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you, I should know more details, but it escapes me. You moved from there to, because Raphael jumped around quite a bit, and you were with him.
Yes,
so, yeah.
we lived in Merrimack, and we had 2 houses there.
Yep.
We built our dream house and lived in it for 18 months and moved to Ohio.
Right, that's right. He went to work at Kent State, right?
At Ohio State.
Oh, Ohio State,
Yeah.
right. Yep.
And while we were there, I was not able to get a teaching job.
In Ohio.
in Ohio.
Okay.
Well, in that we were living in Westerville, which is right outside of Columbus, Ohio.
And you had your children,
Yes, we had both. I had both of the girls by then.
and their names were.
And Kathy is the oldest one, and Christy
Okay.
is the youngest.
And so you were in Ohio. What just roughly what years would that be when you were?
1978.
Okay.
We left New Hampshire, and he went earlier than I did. And then after, because I was teaching, and he left, I think, in Memorial Day weekend, I think. No. He left in April. And then I came out at the end of school. But I drove all the way from New Hampshire to Ohio with just the two kids.
Okay. Those were tougher years teaching. There weren't as many positions in those years. I mean, that wasn't like the 50s. The 50s, the kind of baby boom was over.
Yeah.
And they were kind of a little bit more stable.
Right. And out in Ohio, it was harder to get a job. But we were in Westerville for 1 year, and then we moved to Canton, Ohio. And my husband taught at the university, at Walsh University.
Okay.
And while he did that, I taught at a private day school, which was very interesting and very enjoyable.
And that was, what grades were you teaching?
I taught second and third grade. In fact, I ended up being our youngest daughter's third grade teacher.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Which proved to be interesting.
I bet, yeah. There's got to be interesting challenges there.
Yes.
So I have a son that's in second grade, so I can relate very clearly to that age span there. So you have, so where did you go from there? So you.
We stayed in Canton for 2 years, and then we came back to Connecticut.
Okay.
And like I said, I grew up in Connecticut, so my husband got a job for the University of Connecticut, but working at the with like DCF.
Okay.
And he set up programs for training for them.
Okay. So you were, and then you were with them. Where did you? Where were you?
We actually lived for 1.5 years at my parents' house because we had a house in Ohio that things were so hard. Their multiple listings was like a New York phone book. It was so big at that time. So many houses.
Similar to some of the situations out there today.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And so it took 1.5 years for our house to sell.
Now, you didn't stay. You came with them and you stayed with your parents and left the house for sale there.
Yes.
And
yes.
obviously you had to sell that.
We had a friend from the college living there.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
So somebody was using it.
Yes.
So you moved to Manchester?
Yes, and we're there for 1.5 years. And then my husband had gotten a basketball coaching job at East Granby High School.
All right.
So then when our house sold, we didn't know exactly where to go, but he was up here. He liked the people in East Granby. We liked the small town. We were from a fairly small town at the time in New Hampshire. So we found a house that we liked, and we decided to live here.
What were your first impressions of East Granby when Raphael brought you out here?
It was a small town, a lot of enthusiasm, especially at the basketball games. The people seemed very friendly, and we liked that kind of an atmosphere.
Manageable size, a lot smaller than Manchester.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had, did you bought your first house on North Road? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many people from East Granby. It gets a little.
We've lived there all along.
Yeah, and you were happy with the neighborhood and the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Obviously, you're still there.
We have a very talented neighbor who carves.
Yeah.
Out of wood.
I've seen some of his sculptures.
And it's phenomenal what he can do.
Has he been there a long time?
Yes, he's been there generations.
Right.
Generations.
So you're in East Granby and you're looking for a job. Where did you end up?
I taught in Windsor for 1 year. Then I got a job in Hartford. And
Hartford
I was
school
teaching in Hartford.
What part of Hartford?
I was at it was at the time it was Vine Street School, but it would change the name to Milner School.
After
Mayor Milner, who was a very, very nice man.
He seemed it. Yeah. I was young, but he seemed like a very
he was at the school a fair amount of time.
Now, that's an inner city school, so that's a lot of challenges that maybe some of the teachers or the teaching situations in the suburbs don't encounter. What kept you there? What was the lure of the challenge?
Well, for one thing, it wasn't too easy to come by jobs
Okay.
at that time.
Okay.
So I had a job there, and I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed at that school for 20 years.
Wow.
Yes, it was extremely challenging. I loved the children. The first year I taught a combination of first and second grade, and I found that very difficult, but managed to get through it. And then
What a combination of first and second?
yes, they didn't quite have enough second graders to make another class, and they didn't quite have enough first graders to make another class, so they combined them.
So in Hartford, there was too many schools at that point in that grade level, or
Well, at that particular...
just strikes me as kind of odd that you'd have a shortage of kids. It's a big city.
Well, yeah, but you just never know how it's going to turn out year to
yeah,
year,
yeah.
you know. So then when an opening came in kindergarten, I went to kindergarten, and I was there for most of the time.
Okay, so you were a kindergarten teacher for how many years?
Oh, 19.
19 years, wow. You know, that's a fascinating place to be in the middle of I mean, we all understand the challenges of educating kids in a city environment and some of the social issues that you're going to encounter that are a little bit different.
Well, you know, I wonder how much people who have not been there really understand the challenges of the inner city.
Why don't you
child.
share some with us? Because it fascinates me.
Well, I remember a set of twins came into school, and they had no idea what to do with a pencil or a crayon. They had never seen one. They didn't know what to do with them. And so I worked a lot with them. I had a teacher's aide in the room, too. So I would try to take the children from where they came in and keep building and building for their progress. And usually by the end of the year, I'd see more than a year's growth, but it wasn't ready they weren't ready for first grade.
Right.
And not all of them.
Right.
Some of them were absolutely wonderful.
Right.
And it upsets me to hear people condone the teachers in Hartford or any inner city so much. Because if you look at what's going on, especially the kids graduating from high school, we have many children going to wonderful colleges.
Right.
And the education is there. They've had some wonderful AP classes at the high school and wonderful programs. And the education is there if the children take advantage of it.
Okay.
But going back to the kindergarten, I had a little boy. I was using a program called the Letter People. And each week we did a different letter, and they had a little blow-up character for every letter.
Right.
And there was a song and a story about all these characters and to help them learn the sound and how to write the letter and everything. And the first letter we did was M. So we did the letter M more than any letter in the whole alphabet. Well, I had a little boy his name began with M.
Right.
And he could sing all the songs. He knew all the stories of the people. Even in June when he finished kindergarten, he couldn't tell you the name of one letter. He learned a lot.
Right.
He learned an awful lot that year, but not what you would expect.
So would I guess that's more along the lines of a classic learning disability. I mean, there's something that's just not.
It could have been. A lot of these children come from a non-educational home.
Right.
And some of the parents don't read. I did have one year a mother who told me she couldn't read, but she was interested in her daughter. And so I got her from, I think we went to the town library, and she got a tape recorder. And I'd record the notices that we sent home and things that we needed to come back. I would tape it, and she'd put it on the tape recorder and hear it.
Wow.
So
the challenges must have been vast, because you were dealing with not just a few kids in this kind of learning disabled kind of spectrum, but you had quite a few.
Yes,
So there was
and many children came to school and they didn't know their colors.
Wow.
They didn't know a letter from a number. But they learned.
Yeah. Now, what did you notice any change over the time you were there? I mean, was there an improvement in the 20 years you were there in terms of the children coming in, or the ability to address the issues, or the end result was? Just to, I guess, to paraphrase some of your impressions over that period of time?
Not really so much. And
No?
after working there for 20 years, I don't know what the answer is.
Right.
However, when I left, we were using a very scripted program. And in fact, every question I was supposed to ask, I had to read from the book. Now, and it didn't matter whether the kids were at that level of learning or not. I just had to teach whatever the lessons were. And they assumed the children knew their letters and assumed they knew to write, how to write, and many of the children didn't.
So the issues were still there, it's just the approach had changed.
Yeah, and according to the program, the children were reading could read some by the end of kindergarten. Well, I had my kids reading, the kids who were able to, I had them reading somewhat by the end of kindergarten anyway.
Right.
But at least with other programs, I could do what was appropriate for their learning at that time.
So structure more remedial programs for the kids that needed in certain areas.
Yeah, or more personalized instruction.
So I guess that begs the question, which it sounds like you really don't, you're not sure, but if you could change one thing about the schools, is there anything that you would suggest with your years of experience? What if there was one thing?
One thing I would suggest that would help tremendously is smaller classes.
How many kids
at the
were
young
in?
years? One year, I taught double session of kindergarten for quite a few years before they went to full day. And one time I had 28 kids in the morning and 28 in the afternoon.
And that was
a lot of children to keep track of.
Especially considering the percentage of issues that you had to deal with in that class. I think people don't really comprehend what you have to deal with in the city. You have an economic strata that's kind of been cut off from the rest of society almost, and there's a lot of issues that revolve around that. I mean,
it's just unbelievable what goes on. One year I had a little girl, and her mom, after a while, she came into school and sat in the classroom. And I could tell she was very interested in her little girl, which was fine. And after a while, she'd come and stay I was doing half-day kindergarten at the time.
Right.
And after a while, when I asked a question, she'd raise her hand. Well, what I finally realized was this was her first positive experience at school.
The mother.
For the mother.
Wow.
No, really.
Yeah, no,
I mother.
Don't.
I accepted her and I let her come in as often as she wanted to, and I was happy to have her there because I figured anything she could learn from there could help her child.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to figure that out, and she would raise her hand just like the children would, and happy to do so. And I was happy to have her.
Wow. Yeah, that's something you really wouldn't run into in the suburbs. I mean, that's really
I had another little boy who, anything he touched, he broke. And I had to watch him constantly because he'd break the tape recorder, he'd break anything in the room. I finally figured out what was going on. He absolutely loved his daddy.
Yep.
And his daddy was in jail. So he thought if he could be bad enough, he could go be with his daddy.
Oh, that's sad.
Now,
Wow. I think I read a statistic once in Hartford that 30% of the children in the school system in Hartford, 20%, have at least one parent somewhere in the corrections system, which is mind-blowing when you really stop and consider it.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, I may be wrong on the number, but it was a large number. Yeah. Now, in terms of addressing that in the city. I mean, these smaller classes. But what are your feelings? Like they bring children out to the suburbs. I mean, I found that the kids that I've interacted with in my son's level that have come from Hartford seem to do very well. And I don't know if there's just a certain number of children.
That is true, and I believe in these programs where the kids go to outer towns and everything. But don't forget, they are children of parents who read.
That was going to be my next question.
They have to fill out forms.
Yeah.
And they have to have a desire to have their child go.
Right.
Now, we send out forms to a lot of children, but many of them don't come back.
So just by default, a parent who actually is able to get their child enrolled in one of these magnet schools or whatever has become a participant in the education process and has a level of understanding themselves that exceeds a lot of the kids that you get.
So just imagine now what the Hartford schools are left with.
I can imagine, yeah. So in some ways it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because you end up with a...
Well, this No Child Left Behind is a wonderful concept, but everything they're doing is for the children who are doing all right already.
Right.
What have they done for these children who come from homes who it's so hard for their learning environment to be at home?
Well, the cost to society is massive too, because so many of these children are going to end up on the same route that their parents took, and that's not I mean, if their mother can't read and they can't read, there aren't a lot of options.
No, and when I was teaching, I tried to take the children on field trips as much as I could.
Right.
And I never had problems with their behavior on field trips.
Right.
But you know what I realized after a while? That the ride on the bus was as exciting to them as a field trip itself. Because some of them hadn't been out of Hartford.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's no easy answer. I guess at this point they've got it down where the higher achieving kids are ending up in the magnet schools and some of the choice programs in the suburbs.
And I think some of the magnet schools there's various names for them now, but I think some of them, the children have to take a test to get into. And they have to maintain a certain average to stay there. The public schools aren't like that. Which
in some ways makes sense, but once again, you're getting back to the same issue of you're leaving behind some kids that are even worse off because they don't have higher functioning peers.
Right.
At least they can learn from
they don't have the role models.
Exactly, exactly, right. Wow. Big challenge. I mean, there's really you could probably do a whole show on that. Yeah. Or a series for that matter. If you, we've not to go on and on about this, but is there any solution that you can think of other than smaller classes? And you think if you had the smaller classes in the city, you could work?
Help because the children are so emotionally needy.
Right.
In fact, I would say to my classes, I say, like walking down the hall in a line. Now, when you have a school of 700 or 800 children, you just need to do that.
Right.
So I tell them they're doing such a good job. Smile. When you're doing the right thing, it makes you feel good.
Right.
Let's smile as we walk down the hall, and they would.
So you made it fun.
I tried to, and I had enough books of my own personal books at home that I could run my whole kindergarten based on children's literature.
Wow.
And I would do so much with the children's literature. I used to start the year with the Gingerbread Man book, and I had a big book about this big, and I would make a gingerbread cookie that big.
Okay.
And I'd bring them to school.
Right.
And then I'd read them the story, and I used that because the next day when they came, the gingerbread man was missing. So I used that as a way to introduce the children to the school.
Okay.
So we went to the nurse's office to see if he was there. We went to the principal's office, to the music room, to the gym.
Let's go find him.
Let's go find and of course all the other teachers after a year or two knew exactly what I was doing.
Right.
So they'd go into a classroom and I'd say to them, we'd ask if they've seen the gingerbread man. And they'd say no, but then the teacher would say, well, what does a gingerbread man say? So they would say, run, fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man.
Right.
So every year we'd find it in a different place.
Right.
But that way, I got the children to know where all the different rooms were in the school.
Right, right.
And one year they found it in the principal's office.
Okay.
And one of the little boys went home and told his mom, "You wouldn't believe what the principal did. He stole our gingerbread."
Yeah. Well, you were teaching those kids at a magical age. That's really a fun.
Well, it took me quite a while to get to know my actual role with these inner city children.
Right.
I mean, I know I was a teacher,
Okay.
but to put my middle class morals down on them, that's not their life.
Right.
That's not how they live. So every once in a while I'd have to tell them, well, you might talk like that at home, but at school we don't talk like that.
Okay.
So I did make a distinction between
It's a fine line you had to walk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But the kids were wonderful kids, and they love to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just like any other child.
Sounds like a fascinating career that you had. You could really, like I said, you could do several shows just on your experience in the school. So, okay, so
About probably 1998, my sister, who at the time was a minister for the Congregational churches, and she worked at their headquarters in Hartford.
okay,
And one time we were at my mom's, and she was saying how the Congregational churches would like to make a commitment to the inner city kids, but at that time they didn't have a connection. So I said, well, I happen to be connected to about 700 or 800 kids. Would that do?
right,
And from that conversation, we developed what we called a face-to-face program.
okay,
And that next year, they have a summer camp in Sharon, Connecticut, they call it Silver Lake.
okay,
And so we said, why don't we take the kids out to the lake? We said, fine, we'd like to do that. So I took some 4th, 5th, and 6th grade kids and teachers. And every month, the teachers and I would get together, and we would plan exactly what we were going to do
okay,
when we were out there. And so we did that. We went the first Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of May. And it was an outstanding experience. Well, after we did that for a few years, I was introduced to a 5th grade teacher in Granby.
okay,
And I said, well, how about if we take a 5th grade from Hartford, from my school, and your 5th grade, and take them out to Silver Lake?
sure,
So we talked about that, and we got the approval for it. And so every month, she would come down to Hartford, and we'd plan everything out. And we would have the children meet. We did different activities, maybe 3 times before we went to camp, so that when we went camping, they already knew the kids from Granby,
There
and
was some
the
connection.
Hartford kids knew the Granby kids. And that worked out very well.
really,
And then when we took them to the camp, it was just some of the most outstanding things that I've done with children.
and this is 5th graders.
5th graders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's once again.
And that's why we called it face to face, because we were getting urban and suburban kids together.
Right,
Or
right.
more rural kids.
in a social setting.
Yeah.
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 That's great. Yeah. So it sounds like you found some rewards through the years.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
it was that we did for 13 years, and it was a wonderful. Every year was a different experience and a wonderful experience.
That sounds beautiful. It sounds like there was you had a real commitment. It's just your husband's the same way. You were very committed to education and developing it within the format that you found yourself.
Right,
It's a test. I mean, we need
Between the 2 of us, we have taught everything from kindergarten, and he's taught graduate courses in college. I think we have missed 5th and 6th grade, or 4th and 5th.
Okay,
And that's it. Other than that, between the 2 of us, we taught everything.
but you did your face to face with 5th graders. So
With the
you
5th
touched them.
graders,
So-
right.
Yeah, I'm sure you changed a lot of people's lives, Sue, and it's on behalf of society. Thanks.
Well,
I mean,
it's
you put the
interesting,
efforts
because
in.
over the years, I had one boy who I had, I think, my first year, and he came back to see me every spring
Oh,
until he
beautiful.
was about 17.
Really.
And I had another family who I had the son and the daughter.
Right.
And they came back every year for many years until they moved back to Puerto Rico.
Okay. Yeah, so you had your rewards along the way
Oh,
too,
yes.
those experiences. That's great. I don't think there's much that could be much more satisfying than changing a life for a child. I mean, they're really so dependent upon adults for everything. So,
Oh yes, yeah.
So when you we'll just bounce back a little bit to East Granby and your experiences here. Now, your daughters had already been through school when they came back here, right? Or when you moved here?
No, our oldest daughter was in high school.
Okay, so they had a few years.
And then our youngest one, I think, was in 5th or 6th grade. 6th grade.
So you got to see some pretty drastic differences between what you were dealing with there and what was going on here in Little East Granby.
Yeah. Oh yes, big differences.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. When you were you bounced around quite a bit. I mean, you've lived in different places. So comparing them to East Granby, what would you say some of the benefits of a smaller town versus some of the things that are more challenging? I mean, what would your...
Well, we had friends every place we went.
Okay.
And I think that's what makes a
It does,
community,
yeah.
are the friends. We were only in Westerville, Ohio for 1 year, but we made some very, very good friends there. And it was a very nice area. The education in that area was very good. And we enjoyed it there, but we only stayed there a year. But the moving that we did helped our daughters learn and understand that they could go somewhere new, like off to college, and they'd be okay.
Gave them confidence.
They knew that they
Yeah.
could make friends.
Right.
And so in hindsight, that
Yeah.
was a plus.
I suppose when you're making the move, you feel like you're bouncing your kid around. There's got to be concerns on both sides. I know,
Oh,
just
yes.
speaking as a parent,
Yeah.
what I would think. But I mean, in hindsight, there was some definite benefit there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's great. You have some well-adjusted kids that are used to change. So you have so your experiences in the East Granby schools were fine. You had no.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Now, if you were if looking at the town that you now call your hometown, is there anything you would change about it? Is there any suggestions you would make as a? I mean, this is not meant to be critical, and I
No.
always preface it by saying that, just observations. You've lived quite a few different places. Is there any advice you'd give to your adopted
No, I think it's
hometown?
a well-organized town. Like the larger manufacturers or businesses are closer to the airport.
Right.
Which is,
Sensible.
yeah, which is good. I like to see the downtown area coming along. Stores or businesses are in and out of there quite a bit, but
It's a common theme, more retail.
Yeah. I think we're doing fine, and as long as we keep, there's a plan,
Yeah.
and keep it going. I'm not sure how many more great big houses should be built as opposed to
Normal.
smaller houses
Yeah.
or more normal houses, because
Yeah.
they're not being built much.
Well, I don't think
I don't mean just in East Granby, but anywhere.
you mean the starter homes for people, homes that
Yeah,
are not just
or-
normal sized.
Yeah.
What we used to be called normal. Yeah, there's some housing going up on the east side of town. The name of the road's going to escape me right now, but where Route 20 intersects East Street. If you go north up towards Suffield, across from from where Peak Fitness used to be, and they built the new health club there,
yes.
across the street there, that big
Okay.
field. There's some, relatively dense housing being constructed there, which it's some of it would be for senior, and I think they changed the zoning. But anyway, there's some of that going on. I don't think you're going to see a lot of huge houses built in any sort of organized fashion for a few years, being the real estate market. So we'll see. But it's interesting. The retail theme seems to be common. I think most people like the convenience of local shopping.
Yes.
But it's hard to sustain it in a smaller town. So there's some balance there. So if you were any characters that you can think of from East Granby that jump out at you? I mean, you mentioned your neighbor. It sounds like that's an interesting fellow.
Yeah, he is. He's a very interesting person.
And you can't say your husband either.
No, okay. Al Letterman, who was the superintendent of schools.
Okay.
He did a good job. And for one of the anniversary celebrations, we had a choir. The town had a choir.
Really?
and a high school student who was, well, she could sing opera beautifully.
Really?
I can't even remember her name, but she was a director of the choir, and I was part of that, and that was really a very nice thing.
Kind of a high point of your time
Right.
here. Yeah.
And
that's
now
great.
the Lions Club does the flea markets
Yep.
once or twice a
Coming
year.
up next week.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
yep.
And that's good. I like to see community activities going on.
So the civic kind of cohesion is, yeah. If you had and this, once again, it's a theme of change, and you sound like you're fairly happy with the town and the direction it's going. But if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, what would it be? If narrowing down your observations, what would you, or something you would do in East Granby if it was?
Well, I don't know. They've done pretty well. We live right. The Greenway is right in back of our house.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that is used so much. And since they've opened the bridge,
Yeah.
the trestle bridge over
Yeah.
the river, I can't tell you how many more bikes there are.
It's funny, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I remember hearing so many people disparage it. Why are they spending all this money? But if you could see the volume of bicycles on it, it's almost like rush hour on a nice Saturday afternoon. It's outrageous.
It's hard to walk
I know.
because of so many bikes coming
Yeah.
in all directions.
Which is great.
But it's fine. It's good. That was I think, a good addition.
Absolutely.
My dog didn't like it so much. We had
No.
a dog, and
Nor your
she was
neighbor's
used
dogs.
to. Yeah, my neighbor's dogs too. but that was a good addition.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. East Granby is a nice town.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would, if you were giving advice, this is a question I try to ask of every guest, and having been a teacher, it certainly is even more prescient. But if you were giving advice to children growing up today, and you had to narrow it down to something, could you do that? What would your advice be?
To always do the best that they can.
Okay.
To always feel that they have done the best that they can.
Right.
And air all the situations and be honest.
Right.
With themselves.
Honesty
with
and hard
everybody.
work. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds like Ben Franklin could have given that. That's a
Yeah,
common,
right. One thing you mentioned about what I'd like to see, I'd like to make sure the community stays focused on education.
Okay.
Now, our children are out of the school
Right.
system for years,
Right.
but it is still important to provide the best education we can for the students of the community,
Right.
whether your children are in school or not.
Right.
And of course, being in education, we always think that there's all the money you can should be spent on education. But
There's financial constraints, but I think you're right. I mean, I don't think anybody ever regrets, or any society regrets investment in educating their children.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes for a better world. It makes for a more successful. I mean, the flip side is neglecting that sort of thing and having to play catch up for 20 years
Yeah.
while the rest of the world invests. And, I mean, it's a modern society, and you need to be educated to function in it. So, and if we want our kids to pay Social Security and all the other things that we've set up as a society, we better educate them darn good. 'Cause
Right. Yeah.
it's a pretty big. Yeah, that's. The other thing about that too is I think most people lose sight of the fact that if somebody's really looking to move into a town, that's one of the first things they'll consider. Even if they don't have children, it bodes well for the quality of life in that town,
Right.
and also the stability of your investment in your home. Because if you have serious issues in your schools, you're going to lose a lot of people that would pay a premium to live in your town, or But if you were you went through many years of education. You lived in East Granby for many years, and you've experienced it from both sides, from being an educator and from being having your children go through the schools. Is there any one issue that you think made the most difference in your children's lives in terms of education? The moving was probably one of those things that jumps out that gave them a. But is there any educational strength you think they took from their years in different schools that was specific, or they're two different kids? So they're probably,
Oh, they're totally two different
now, one of
children.
them is teaching, right?
Yes, our youngest daughter is actually a media specialist at New Britain High School, and
Okay.
she has 2 jobs. She's a part-time, half-time media specialist and half-time technology person
Okay.
for the computers, and so she's working very hard in both of
I bet,
those.
yeah.
And our other daughter is a chiropractor in Montana.
Wow, that's a completely different world.
Yes.
Profession. Yeah. So, all right. So it was a pleasure having you here, Sue. Tonight we've had you, and we've got both sides of the story. And we're going to compare them. But it really was a pleasure. It's one of, once again, it was one of the more fascinating. It's always fascinating when you have people come in and share their story, and once again, Sue has proved that. They've brought some very interesting subjects to light. Thank you for joining us tonight on Reflections on East Granby, and we'll see you next time. Once again, you can view our show online at www.gctv16.org, and you go to the Reflections on East Granby prompt, and it's also on Friday nights at 8 p.m. and it repeats at various times. Otherwise, you can also buy tapes if there's a show that you're interested in. One of the ways that GCTV raises money is they sell copies of the tapes, and you can do that through the website, request a copy. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a nice week.